Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another riveting episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. So glad you decided to join us. We're so glad you let your smart device just download this on the fly. Whatever got you here, we're glad you're here. Well, I've got another good interview teed up. It's actually going to go in a little different direction. We're going to talk about that here in a second. But first, wanted to do some updates here on the farm. We're in the process of weaning, so we've got all of our piglets in piglet jail right now. So they're hanging out in the weaning barn, which is, of course, our farrowing barn as well. So we double duty there. And actually just checked on them before coming in here to record these bumpers. And everybody's doing well. Even with this, we're experiencing a little bit of a dry spell here in West Virginia, believe it or not. In fact, it's been about 2.5 weeks since we've had any measurable rain at all. So we're starting to see that. In fact, I had to pump water for the sow's wallow for the first time. That's the first time in years I've had to do that. But it is what it is. It's all part of the experience, right? So we're a little dry right now, so now would be a good time to do some earthwork. So we're actually got a little mini vacation coming up. As soon as we get back from that, we are going to get some heavy equipment in here and move some dirt while it's dirt and not mud, and see if we can do some improvements here on Red Tool House. Another quick shout out real quick to our Patreon supporters. Appreciate everyone that's joining and supporting us there. Actually, at the beginning of recording this, I had another one pop up. I appreciate it. It seems like every time I do bumpers, somebody joins. So I just need to keep recording bumpers all day long, right? So I want to give a shout out to Jordan Salyards for signing up and supporting us on Patreon. Really appreciate every single one of you that do that. That helps out tremendously, and really anxious to be able to pull the trigger on some of the things that we've done and that we're working on. We hit a certain benchmark. But already, if you're a Patreon supporter at any level, obviously you get the bonus episodes. We're in our marketing discussions right now, and I've had some good conversation going on there, so be sure to check those out. Those of you that are already Patreon supporters, if you have any issues with that and you don't know where to find the feed, just send me an email. And you can email me at troy@redtoolhouse.com, and I can make sure you've got the link to that feed. It'll download automatically just like these podcast episodes do once you have that RSS feed plugged in. All right, so today we are talking with somebody, and as soon as I get my notes to pop up here, we are talking with Kolin Buzerak. And I'm sorry, Buzerak. Sorry, Kolin. I even had it spelled out phonetically there and still butchered it. Kolin Buzerak. Kolin is in New York at Starry Ridge Farm. And man, I know I sound like a broken record. Really enjoyed this conversation. That's what I love about doing this. So we're up to 60 some, almost 70 episodes. And every single person I've interviewed just has a unique perspective on something that's going on their farm. It's not like cookie cutter. At least I hope you guys feel the same way, that we're not just plowing the same ground every single time we do an episode, that we're actually looking at new stuff, and you're getting a different perspective on pastured piggery. I find it that way. So hopefully you do as well. But what's interesting with our conversation between Kolin and I, we kind of went in a different direction. We did talk about pigs, of course, but as you get in and you listen to what he's talking about, he's got an established farm that has quite a few other revenue-generating elements together, and pigs are just a piece of a multi-piece puzzle. So it's really neat to see. I'm a big fan of polyculture. I'm a big fan of diverse income streams. That way, if something happens in the pig market, you've got something else to fall back on. But it's really neat to listen to him talk about taking the land that he was able to get through family, and had some things already established, had some good management practices already in place. So decades of good management have really paid off for him. So I think he talks about the sugar bush he has for maple syrup production. Some of the things where it was just somebody being ecologically sound back then to make the right choices now, and he's able to reap the benefits of that. So that's something I'd like to plant the seed in all of our minds, that if you're my age and you're in your late 40s and you're thinking, I got maybe 15, 20 years of this hard push maybe, So what's the farm going to look like then? That's one way to look at it, but also look at it and say, what if my kids or what if somebody else's kids decide they want to do this? Then how neat would it be for somebody to come in and pick up where I left off? Hopefully somebody didn't come in and doze it and turn it into a housing development. You never know, right? Obviously, I guess I could do some things in trust to make sure that didn't happen, but I don't want to think about that right now. So anyway, back on track. So anxious to play this interview with you guys, or for you guys, with Kolin, so you can hear exactly what he has going on up there in New York. So I'm going to, without further ado, I'm going to roll on to Kolin, and then I'll catch you guys on the backside of the interview. So back up in New England, and we're talking with Kolin Buzerak. He's at Starry Ridge Farms in Petersburg, New York. So welcome, Kolin.
Hey, Troy. How's it going today?
Going well. Glad you could take the time to join us. I know you've got a lot going on right now, so I appreciate you taking a time out of the evening to come sit down and talk with me.
Yeah, not a problem. I'm happy to do it. A long-time listener of your podcast, and happy to be a part of it.
Wonderful. All right. So tell me a little bit about Starry Ridge Farm. Give me that 40,000-foot elevation description there.
So Starry Ridge Farm was originally bought by my father back in 1976. He had bought it as kind of a second property to eventually build a home on and move up. He lived down in Westchester County at the time. After meeting my mother and when my older brother was born, they decided it was a good idea to kind of move up here full time. So they came up here in the early 80s. So we're situated in upstate New York, right on the tri-state of Vermont, Massachusetts, and New York. I'm literally the border town of both of those. You can see the hillside, and right over that side is Massachusetts and Vermont, and that's Williamstown, which is a nice little town in Massachusetts that's it's got a nice college in it. There's a farmer's market over there, pretty good nightlife and everything. And then there's Pownell, Vermont, and that's just kind of a smaller little town, but there's also Bennington, and then you can get further up into Vermont pretty easily from there. So we're situated kind of in a bowl. We own 135 acres, roughly, and of that, it's all on a hillside, which I know you know all about.
Yeah.
We've only got flat land that we created, so we don't have anything that's too easy to work with, but it definitely works well for raising animals and doing things like that. That's kind of, we're positioned mostly to the east and to the south. We've got a little bit of north-facing hillside as well. And inside that, we've got, about 2.5 acres or so of agricultural land that we've created on terraces and in the less sloped areas on our farm. And with that, we're doing lots of vegetable production for our CSA. We've got a 40-member CSA that my girlfriend Kat and I run. And then surrounding that is mostly hardwoods and deciduous forests, and about maybe 35 or so acres of pretty overgrown fields at this point, but we've maintained a good portion of it, and that's what we're going to be fencing in over the next year or so. And we've also got some pasture ground that we're actually working with that got some hard fence stuff and got some electric fence on the way to start putting that up here pretty soon.
Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds like a great setup. Talking about your elevation there, what do you know your elevation difference? So what's your overall relief of the farm on average?
Yeah, we've got, let's see, I think down at the bottom of the road it's right around 900 or so feet, and then the highest point we've got is like 1,600 plus feet.
Oh, okay. That's pretty good change. That's what,
yeah.
700 some feet. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty substantial. I'm only dealing with a couple hundred feet of relief on our 100 acres, but that still makes it interesting for sure.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely, it's interesting kind of how the land works. There's definitely some really steep spots once you get further up the hill, but the beginning of the hill is relatively gradual.
Yeah.
And that's most of our stuff. Our houses are situated right around 1,000 foot, or almost 1,100 feet.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our sweet spot is right in there. There's a bunch of gardens and stuff right around there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you said your folks bought that. So are you all multiple dwellings on there? You guys sharing a residence? How do you have that set up?
Yeah, so originally my dad bought it. He actually originally bought a piece of property down in West Virginia. I can't remember exactly where, but he was for, I think, a year or so, and then he found this spot up here, and he had been coming up here with a friend for his grandparents lived up here, and he really loved the area, so he ended up moving up here instead. But when he originally bought the majority of the land, he bought it with a few friends, and then throughout the years, most of them sold out to him, except for one lady who still lives on the property. It's not part of the 138 acres or whatever that we own. It's actually, she's got her own separate 5 acres. We just use the same driveway.
Yeah.
And then there's one other person. There's another person that kind of bought in later on that built a house up top.
Okay.
So, but yeah, my parents live on the property, and then my girlfriend Kat and I live on the property here as well. And actually, at the moment, her mom lives in my parents' kind of guest side of the house while she's about to buy a piece of property.
Oh yeah. All right. Cool. Sounds like that's sounds pretty cozy.
And then actually, my brother just closed on a piece of property, 170 acres actually. That's just one property over from us.
Oh wow. Oh cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. It wasn't his first pick of pieces around here, but it kind of just worked out really well. He got a great deal on it, and yeah, he just closed on it. He just got I can't remember exactly when he closed on it. Early April, I think.
Good deal. Yeah, that sounds great. It's handy to have family around like that when it comes time to tackling big tasks or covering things while you're out. So that always comes in handy. Well, let's do this, because I want our listeners to hear more about your polyculture, because looking at your pre-screen stuff, that I really like this idea, and I want to make sure our listeners hear all the different opportunities with polyculture. This is the Pastured Pig Podcast, but looking at the opportunity of having multiple revenue sources from your farm and not having those proverbial eggs in the one basket can help with cash flow, can help with the ecology of the farm, can help with a whole lot of things. So we're going to stick a pin in that for now and come to that as we get into this overall discussion. But let's first talk about your pig experience. I know you've got experience raising pigs primarily on kind of like a private scale level, but even doing your own processing and even specialty finishing. So let's talk about that. So give me the history and your experience with raising hogs.
Yeah, let's see. The first time I raised pigs, I think I was 17 years old, and I got 2 little wiener pigs from my neighbor. Can't remember. I think they were like $50 a piece, and I had been reading a bunch of pastured pig stuff before that, and all these guys are keeping it in with electric fence. So I said, well, we'll try that. Everybody thought I was crazy around here, which was not a good feeling for me at first. But then I found out, boy, they train on electric so easily. It never became a problem. So yeah, first time I raised them, I think I was 17, right before I graduated high school. I just raised a couple for ourselves. And then over the years, right after I graduated high school, that next year, I started up a CSA. My parents had run a CSA, vegetable CSA, when I was younger. I was like 4 or 5. And then over the years, I was like, I'd love to start that back up. Right after I graduated high school, I did. I started that up for a season. And that year I raised 2 the first year. Then I think I raised 3 or 4 the next year. And then I jumped right up to about 8 the year after that. And that year I raised them and sold them to CSA members, mostly and CSA members and neighbors that did all the processing themselves.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
They were pretty rural here. We're about 45 minutes east of Albany, so there is a good market base over there. But as far as for our CSA, it's all local folks that are either a town away or so, and most of them right here in Petersburg. So I raised a few hogs that one year for some sales, and then I had actually moved away right after that season and moved to Colorado, and then I actually was away for about 7 years, moving around. So I didn't have any pigs while I was traveling and living other places. But then once I did get back home here, I got another round of pigs the first year I was back. And let's see, that was 3 years ago. So yeah, I've been raising pigs the last couple of years. Well, all for home use.
Yeah. Yeah. So you talked about on-farm processing, and then I know there's some in your pre-screen. You talked about some doing some of your own curing and trying some of those things. So tell a little bit about that, your experience and how that went.
Yeah, sure. Well, the first year we did it. We had our one of our local friends here, this older guy Dan. He came over and taught my brother how to do the whole processing and the slaughter and the processing. And then we kind of took it from there and put our own spin on it. But it's definitely my preferred method. You really are able to show the animal all the respect you possibly can when you're the one that does all the work. And obviously it'd be harder on a larger scale. I don't think I'd be able to do that completely if I end up raising a bunch of hogs at the same time. But for home use especially. So we definitely do all of our own butchering, and then we make our own sausages, and we do case sausages, and then we cure and smoke our own bacon and ham.
All right, very good. So do you do old school smokehouse, or do you cold smoke, or do you do a electric smoker? How do you smoke?
Yeah, we actually built I got this nice 2-door commercial stainless steel refrigerator from somebody at some point, and the compressor was bad, and I was gonna turn it into a cooler, but it was kind of too much work for too little space. But then my brother and I were like, oh, we should cut the compressor out and cut a hole in the bottom and turn it into a smoker, and that's what we did. We built oak shelves and oak runners in there to throw in some screens if we were going to do jerky. So, and we got two fire boxes, so we can have a cold smoke or a hot smoke. And then we got some hanging points. We got some. We just kind of built an oak frame and built it inside there so that we could have a nice sturdy top points. And we got a bunch of eye bolts that we can hang whatever we got. Done chickens, and we've done the hams and the bacon's in there. We do.
Yeah.
We smoke them, right? And or until we feel like it's about ready and about time, and then that's that. And then we do our own kind of specialty apple cider based brine that we do. So then we kind of mix that up every year. We kind of mess around with what we put in there, this or that. So.
Yeah. All right. So with your experience in pigs and this desire to grow and get into a little bit more of resale, some commercial elements of your pig processing or pig production, what does that look like? What are your plans here the next year?
So actually my one pig now that I kept over the winter, Dottie, she's a Gloucestershire old spot. That's kind of what I've found I preferred to raise after kind of getting some of these and some of that in the early years and seeing who I liked. I found that the old spots are kind of my favorite. And I really like the carcass that they produce. It's just great. you kind of, especially if you're running them a lot. I move them a lot. I usually move them through about 4 or so acres a season. So they never really get fatty, but then they still have plenty of fat to make lard off of, or just they end up marbling out beautifully. Actually, if you're moving them around like that all the time, and still give them a good diet. We've got a lot of old apple trees and old and nice oak trees and stuff. So we move them through those zones quite a bit.
Yeah.
But about a month or so ago, she got to meet her boyfriend Earl at my buddy's farm just up the road, and he's a registered old spot. And she should be having piglets. It's seeming like she's gonna. She hasn't come back into heat. It's been almost 2 cycles since she was bred. So I'm pretty good. She's getting pretty big. I've never farrowed before, so this is the first for that. But it seems like she's getting bigger at least.
Yeah.
So that's what she's got going on. As soon as she's got the piglets, I'm gonna kind of know how many I'm working with, and then I'm kind of planning on keeping all the gilts that I can, and then I'm gonna try to buy in a registered boar, and then kind of start my own little breeding herd. So as far as numbers, I'm not exactly sure, but I sure would like to have at least three or more gilts by the end of the season that I know I'll be keeping out and breeding for the next year.
Yeah, so great. So it sounds like this year is a year to get your genetics lined up, get your breeding group lined out, and then I assume any boars or I assume what will become barrows, you'll process those off at the end of their life cycle and either consume that yourself depending on the numbers, or possibly even put those up for sale and through wholes and halves or cuts.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. As you know, you can't count your chickens before they hatch or the pigs before they come out.
Right.
So as of right now, I'm just in the waiting game. But I'm being hopeful. As long as I get a few gilts and a few barrows that I can process by the end of the season, I'll be pretty happy, and it'll be a good experience before I'm glad I don't have like all of a sudden 3 sows that are about to drop piglets, and I have no idea what I'm going to do, and I've got so many other things going on. I think this is already a little too much for me, but it's definitely going to be worth it and a good experience. So. Yeah,
and again, you don't know until you do it, and just see how it fits into your model, and just give it a go. Yeah, that's one thing that tell you live and die by that philosophy. I find myself always still having learning experiences from different things, just because they throw you a curveball you weren't expecting. So you just learn from it and hopefully improve for the next time.
Yeah, yep, that's kind of my way to learn on the fly and experience it and really get everything there is from it. And I've always found, at least for me, that's definitely the way that I can know what I really want to do with whatever idea or situation or whatever it is that I've got going on.
Yeah, good deal. Yeah, so I'm anxious to see how that turns out, how your first farrowing goes. Be curious to see how your farrowing goes. Are you thinking you're going to have a specific farrowing spot? Are you going to let her farrow out in pasture? Do you have what's your philosophy or theory on that right now?
Yeah, I've kind of gone back and forth, but last year in the fall I got the starting of my beef herd. So I ended up and got kind of put the cart before the horse, this one, and horse before the cart, whichever way it goes. But I got the cows before the fence. I had to build a barn and kind of keep them corralled at first, and then I got them in the barn, and I kind of did the Joel Southson style deep litter bedding pack. That's where I kept the cows for the winter, and then once I was able to get them out on grass and some fence up, now they're out on grass. But I'm planning on moving her. Right now she's on pasture. pretty close to the barn, so I'm just gonna kind of keep scooching her back down the hill to the barn, which is actually at the bottom of our property. Um, and I think I'm just gonna kind of set her up in there, and she'll have a little run to be out up in the kind of like the lower pasture zone at first, and then kind of tighten her up once she's gonna farrow, and you know, if all goes well, she'll be having somewhere in and around the barn, and they can kind of start their life down there.
Yeah, excellent, good deal. Yeah, that sounds like you've got put some thought into that and have a game plan in place. Good deal. Well, let's do this. Let's talk about. Let's take the pen out of what we said we were going to talk about earlier, and describe with your 130 acres, this polyculture element you have. And maybe let's look at this in two areas. So let's talk about some areas. You mentioned your CSA. You mentioned some cattle. There's some other things I know you were doing. Let's talk about that as far as potential revenue streams or existing revenue streams for you on the farm. And then part two of that would be some of the additional, maybe even permaculture elements or ecological elements that you're adding to the farm for this well-balanced 130 acres.
Yeah, definitely. So when I was growing, my parents are very, very into the homesteading style and the homesteading lifestyle with everything that goes along with it. We were always out in the gardens, and those were our chores that every day is watering this or harvesting that, or, you know, my brother and I always wanted chickens or whatever, and so we always had some laying. And as I mentioned before, my parents did run a CSA when I was younger. It was smaller. I can't remember exactly how many members they had, but they did that. So growing up, I was fully involved in, for sure, the homesteading concept. And on top of that, my parents are also master woodworkers and build and design custom timber frame homes. So they don't anymore. They're retired. I took over from them with that. So they just brought me up being on the land and trying to understand it. And throughout the years, I kept showing interest, and they definitely helped out by bringing us to Cornell Cooperative Extension meetups at different farms or whatever like that, or the NOFA conferences that we have around here, which are so great. So I've just kind of always been pretty passionate about working. And I also mentioned before that I moved away when I was, I would have been 20 when I moved away. Moved to Colorado. Another huge passion in my life is always snowboarding and extreme sports. So I worked in the ski industry for quite a while. That's actually what got me to move away, and then also what got me to kind of keep moving from there. So I spent quite a bit of time chasing the best snow, and I worked in terrain parks, building jumps and setting up rails, and working with professional skiers and snowboarders and building them their own setups and courses for training for big air competitions and things like that. But I always had lots and lots of desire to eventually move back home to start the farm back up again.
Yeah.
Cool. Kind of the direction I wanted to go with it. So once I did move back, I was kind of just throwing around all the ideas of this way and that way to kind of to work it, and I always knew the CSA is kind of like a pretty good base to start out at, and it just works really well. We've got friends and neighbors that always listen for growing vegetables, and that was kind of just the first place to start in mine, and it worked out pretty well. It's our second season for that. The first year I didn't do anything because I was busy with a few carpentry projects. Still am, actually. I was laying floor this morning. Finished that up project I'm doing right now. But as far as the farm goes, that's the main revenue source. We also have a pretty spectacular sugar bush with some beautiful old trees. And that's what my brother and I do. So that's another small portion of the revenue stream. And as far as on the farm, that's really what we've got for profit. But on top of all of that, we've also got on the animal side, we've got the Dottie the pig. We've got 6 cattle, 4 cows, well, 3 heifers, 1 cow, and then 2 young bulls. And then we've also got somewhere around 80 or so laying hens right now, and about 100 little baby chicks that just arrived in the mail last week sometime.
Are those broilers or are those egg layers?
They're all egg layers.
Yeah.
I've done meat before. For this season, if that's doing meat birds, it's just it was just too much to take on, and it was just one more thing. And personally, I love having the eggs at market or for sale for our CSA members, and we also sell to a couple restaurants around here as well.
Yeah.
Our eggs, as well as extra produce that we have. Most of it goes to our CSA members. We try to make sure that we have as much vegetable and produce for them as possible.
Yeah.
So annual agriculture, we've got basically anything you can grow. We have grown basically anything you can grow in this area, but we primarily focus on kind of like high production greens, lettuce, kale, Swiss chard, things along those lines, as well as your staple crops for summer production with your carrots, and we got beets and beans, all sorts of other stuff. I mean, just about everything you can think of. Tomatoes, cucumbers. We actually just got we bought 2 greenhouses, 18 by 100 foot greenhouses. We've got one set up so far, and we were about to set up the other one. We actually got a grant from the NRCS for another 30 by 100 green that we'll be able to purchase here sometime this year and set up as well.
Oh, wow.
We'll be able to really bump up our capacity for cucumbers. We've got enough moisture to where powdery mildew becomes a serious problem with our cucumbers, and as well as the cucumber beetles, which just absolutely ravage any purchase that you have out. So that becomes a bit of a problem. So greenhouse space is highly sought after. So that's kind of our annual culture side. And then as far as perennial stuff, we've got a bunch of old blueberry bushes that my parents planted years ago. They planted about 20 or so when they had first moved up, and another 40 or 50 right around when I was born. So they're, the younger ones are about 30 years old right now, and they are just hanging with flowers right now. Just drooped to the ground this year. I can just tell it's just a perfect season for blueberries. And then we've got some, a really cool thing about our property is it used to be an old cider orchard. About 100 years ago, there's a farmer. Actually, the road the name of my road is Red Moon Road, and that was the guy. That was the cider guy in town for a while, and he had cider apple trees up on this property, some of which are still standing, and then from those there are just hundreds of wild seedling apples that are just scattered all over the place, and there's some really cool, nobody else has these varieties, and it's cool when you prune one out and really take care of it. They produce beautiful apples. We actually sell some of those apples to a local cider maker right here in town. He's got a really good business. He goes down to New York City. He's from New York City and has a place down. He also has a place up here, and he sells his cider, and we supply him with some wild, crazy hillside apples to make some cool ciders out of that he does. So that's another little thing, and we're going to be clearing out. We got about 6 acres or so, I'd say, of pretty densely self-seeded apple areas, which is pretty cool. And working with those trees is really fun.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of potential there for so many things, like you say.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much byproduct coming out of that area that's been neglected that it has a lot of value to it. So I'm going to back up a little bit. I know I'm about 99% confident that everybody listening knows what a CSA is, but I think just for the sake of that the key is for cash flow, the CSA is extremely helpful because you get that cash flow started in the beginning of the year, I assume, and it obviously runs throughout your season. And so it's high intensity, the work that you're doing during growing season, but that cash flow is going with you. Whereas when we look at the protein side of farming, where you've got cattle or you've got pigs and even broiler chickens to some degree, there's that layover of cash, way more for cattle, half a year or so for pigs, and of course, maybe a couple months if you're doing broiler chickens. But it sounds like with your CSA, what's really bringing a lot to the table is not only the traditional veg side, but you've got the eggs, you've got some of this, the blueberries, you've got some of these other options that you can provide to your CSA clients to really keep them engaged. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely, and that's something that I'm really pushing for, and that's where my head's at with the whole farm concept is, I'm fortunate enough to be able to use this land. It's absolutely not ideal agriculture land, but the soil itself is beautiful, and where there are places where we can work it, it's 100% worth growing vegetable crops. But I'm definitely I've got my permaculture design certificate, as well as just years and years of hands-on experience, as well as just reading so many books and online forums and online articles and things like that have to do with perennial agriculture, and that's the direction that I'm really steering a good portion of our property towards. We don't have big areas to do big row crops and things like that, so there's no reason for me to be trying to compete with anybody on growing commodity vegetables or anything like that. But if you can find that, at least the direct to consumer market, like you said, through CSA, community supported agriculture, using the community around us to help support the farm and the greater picture of everything, which is eventually hopefully going to be not only just seasonal veg, but also breaking into real production of protein sources and fat and oil sources through. I've been doing a good amount of hazelnut planting and chestnut planting and walnuts and butternut, as well as some other fruit trees and things like that. And I see the real future of small farms that are my size, being able to really push that perennial agriculture to the next level and truly being able to support a community with a large portion of their dietary needs. And then you add in animals on top of that, and we've got the cows grazing through the hazelnut and the chestnut and the apple planted areas, and then you get the pigs that come through and clean up what you don't harvest, and then you can run chickens through there. And we've got lots and lots of water. We've got all of our water on the property is gravity spring fed. So we've got lots of springs just spouting up all over the place, all over our hills. So we've got tons and tons of potential for pond sites, which is great for irrigation, great for livestock watering, but it's also great for another source of protein as well in the form of fish. And we've got one good-sized pond on our property that's just stocked with some beautiful bass right now. I plan to build quite a few more. I've got an excavator, and my brother just bought a little bulldozer, so between those two, we should be able to push ourselves out some pretty nice ponds and get some more of that going on. I definitely see that whole diet CSA concept is really kind of what I'm pushing for, and trying to get, not go big in one way. It's going kind of big in the whole picture, and getting my my hands in as many enterprises as possible.
Yeah.
To the farm.
Yeah, and that's probably the point that I really wanted to underscore and make sure our listeners picked up on. And this is what I love. And again, so this is me putting my marketing and business hat on. So looking at, you've got a customer base, you've got a captive audience with the CSA, you've got subscribers who are already investing heavily into your farm because you've established that relationship with them with the CSA. So as that grows, whether that grows in the total number of subscribers you have, the total number of CSA clients, or it grows in the value added services you're offering. So I love the fact that you can say, well, I'm going to start looking at protein, oil, and fat production through these nuts. We don't have to become a huge commercial nut producer. You can stick your toe in the water, test that out, and obviously let your CSA clients, because if it's one of those things, I don't know the size of your CSA, but let's say it's 35 shares. Well, 35 shares of testing a new area is a lot easier than to say, okay, I'm going to invest all this stuff and try to hit the ground running, and the economy of scale I need to do it at. I got to have all this expensive equipment, and I got to have this much production. But you've got this captive audience that's going to be your sounding board. And even if you don't grow in the number of subscribers, you can grow in the value added for those subscribers. So they say, yeah, I'll be more than happy to pay 20% more or 30% more or 100% more if now I'm getting pork, I'm getting beef as an option, I'm getting blueberries, I'm getting all these nuts and oils and things. So I love that idea, and I love the concept of diversifying so much that there truly is this value added. It becomes very customer centric, where they're like, why would I ever go anywhere else? Because Kolin's got the neatest setup. It's extremely inclusive. It has all of these things. It's really a one-stop shop, and it's very unique. So I just love that business model you're developing there.
Yeah, great. Thanks. I'm pretty excited about it. And I hope it works out. I hope all those people do think that, Troy. That would be very handy if everybody thinks that and get a few more members. But at the same time, we do have a good base. Last year we had, I think 25 or so members, and then this year we're up to 40.
Wow. Okay.
And we didn't push too hard. I do work full time off the farm as well. I run my own carpentry business, it's just myself and my girlfriend, and I'll hire on some people here and there if I have a big enough job. But for the most part, I just take on jobs that I know or think I can handle. But the farm is definitely where I'm pushing to be full time as soon as possible. If not this year, then definitely next year. I actually just got a message from one of my childhood friends who wants a timber frame cabin up in the Adirondack, so I might not be able to pass that opportunity up. I'd love to do a nice timber. One of my good friends.
Yeah.
That's definitely where we're pushing things with that. I see that potential for, if you've, like you said, you've already got a captive audience. You've already got this great customer base, which are not just customers walking through and buying something at a farmer's market necessarily. They come up to the farm, they see what you do every week. You become very close personal friends with them. A lot of these people I've known my entire life. Some of them are my friends from childhood. Some of them are my friends' parents from childhood. It's just such a great community, and they're already interested. There's no reason not to try to offer as many things as you can, as long as you can make it work. as long as you can manage it and take care of it. And with the perennial side of things, it's just, it's so much easier than annual agriculture, I'll tell you that.
Right.
You just don't have to put as much care into it. You do, but it's different. It's a different type of care. It's not that insane, crazy rush of necessities that those plants have for a very brief period of time. It's even just like lettuce. You'll have lettuce heads within less than 70 days. Pretty much all the lettuce varieties that we have, from the time you plant the seed to the time you harvest, is less than 60 to 70 days. Once you plant, it's usually 45 to 50 days, and harvesting these things. But you have to be on it. You have to have water to them all the time. You have to make sure that there's no weed pressure. You have to, take care of them. If it's too hot, they need to be shaded, or if it's too cold, they need to be covered with row cover so that they don't get burnt by any frost or anything. So you can't too early. So it's just, there's so much work that goes into that annual production side. And then, some of these hazelnuts, I was like, oh my gosh, this thing, I've had it in the bag for way too long. This one done bundle that I forgot about. Oh, should I even plant them? It's well, I'll stick them in, and all of a sudden they're 3 feet tall, and you're oh yeah, that was easy. It's covered in weeds. You pull through the weeds. You're oh yeah, there's buds on it. Yep. Oh, look, there's leaves on it. We're good. And same with the apples. The apples here are a huge inspiration for them, because they just are everywhere and they don't stop. And some years one tree won't produce, and then the next year it'll just be hanging with fruit. And that's kind of the coolest thing, is once you get to that point where the perennial side of things has taken over, and you can literally just kind of sit back and go out and do a little pruning here and there, or weed whack around it, or ideally have cows go graze, or pigs go munch underneath it, and do that whole thing. So yeah, that's definitely pushing that farm towards the full experience.
Yeah, and I think that's a key element, and I want to underscore that part as well. So looking at all this diversification, that diversification can become maddening if they're completely independent, almost like tentacles on an octopus. If they're all going different directions, then you can really run yourself thin. But with your embracing and your training in permaculture, this function stacking, so one system actually helps in other areas. So again, thinking about this idea of your apple orchard, that you're producing these apples for this guy for cider, and then there's other potential for that as you get that cleaned up, more production of apples. But apples on the ground can now equate to feed for animals grazing through it at a quick pace, or apples on the ground, or even the pasture grass around the trees as you clean it up, that becomes a place for your cattle. Then chickens follow behind, like Salatin model, where you're using them for pest control, and they're busting up all the cow patties. Those type of things where you're function stacking and helping reduce, helping that activity provide benefit across the board, whether it's tangible product or some of these intangibles when it comes to weed pressure, fly control, all those type of things. And I think that's where the magic happens when you put forth that effort. You get a system in place, and then it almost becomes auto-generating, but like you said, just a little bit of touch points here and there, as opposed to, like you said, annual, where you're out there every day doing something.
Yeah, definitely. It's so cool to watch the systems work together so well. It's so many people have said it before, all these mentors of mine, I guess you would say, are the people that I'm reading their literature, the people that are writing these books. Mother Nature doesn't farm without animals. So the animal aspect of the farm just works so well, especially when you're working on a broader scale. If I only had 2 acres, yeah, sure, I'd have some chickens. I probably wouldn't be raising pigs. I definitely wouldn't be raising pigs, just because for the way that I like to raise them, I would want to move them.
Right.
I need to move them. I love, that's my favorite thing, is moving them into brand new territory, and they go searching around and munching on this and nibbling on that, finding apples on the ground or acorns on the ground, or they're just kind of grazing. They'll they'll graze, they'll eat grasses, they'll eat forbs, they'll eat little trees and stuff, and it's just an awesome thing to watch. And then you were saying with the fly control, it just started getting warm this spring, and I had the cows down in the barn, and I kind of, at this point, had gotten them out into a little run, and within like a few days, it got warm, and it got to like, it went from like cold temperatures, like staying pretty low, pretty frozen most of the time, to all of a sudden it was like 55, 60 degrees, and it was like fly explosion. And I was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And at the time, like I said before, the cows are down at the bottom of the road, and then, you know, about halfway up is where our house is, or a little ways up is where our houses are. And that's where our chicken coop was. So I got my excavator, and I was already planning on moving them away from the house because they're always getting into gardens and getting into the flower gardens and stuff like that. So I locked all the chickens in one night, and I picked them up and I brought them down there, and the chicken coop's not on skids or anything, so I actually had to like strap it and pick it up and drive it down there, which was fun. It worked out, you know. It's nothing too bad happened. But I got them down there, and I was like, gosh, you know, I just focused them right in on the cows, and I'm not kidding. Within like 24 to 36 hours, the fly pressure basically disappeared.
Yeah.
I mean, it was incredible to see. I couldn't even, that first day that the flies really hatched, I couldn't even be down there. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I moved these chickens in, like less than 2 days, no problem. And there's still very little problem because I've been kind of forcing them along, and they're kind of moving around. I only have the cows in about 3 acres. I've got a ton of electric fence on the way, and I'm going to be setting that up here pretty soon, so I'll get the cows out on a much broader scale. But for right now, they're down in about 3 acres, so I can keep the chickens kind of close to them, and they're just working around the area a little bit. But yeah, it is just so cool to see all these systems work together and really benefit and just profit off of each other so much.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Well, man, I appreciate your insight. I know we did this a little different than what we normally do with our pastured pig discussions, but I appreciate you letting us take a look at the farm as a whole and how that polyculture is working together, and of course how you're going to fold pastured pork into that more for your CSAs and an additional value-added service there. You kind of answered the question that I usually close with there, I think, a little bit. You kind of talked about pigs on new section of land, but just for the sake of being repetitive as I like to be, what do you find the most favorite thing about raising pigs on pasture?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this question because I know you always ask it, and it's such a great one. And you know, the seeing them on new pasture, that whole thing, and working with them, that's a great part of it. But for me, honestly, I like showing people that it's possible. I think that's my favorite part of it. You know, showing people that it is possible. Like how I had said, the guy that I got my first pig from thought I was the craziest kid in the county for trying to keep him in with 2 electric strands. And he thought I was the craziest guy. Of course, he keeps them on a concrete pad in like a very, very small area.
Right.
So, you know, that works for some people, and of course they're going to try to break out, you know. But halfway through the season, he comes up, he says, "Oh, still in? Haven't been getting out, huh?" No, not yet. Everything's going pretty well. He came up again. It's like, "Oh, they're in a new spot. What, did they get out? You had to corral them in?" "No, I just moved them forward." "No, that's pretty neat." And then, you know, that's kind of the case with a few people around here. They just thought I was the craziest person for trying to move pigs around the hillside with electric fence. But you shock those things on their little wet nose, and boy, they do not want to go past that line.
Oh,
so,
yeah, that'll break them that quick.
Yeah, and with you know, my background, and while I was traveling around and not able to farm, I just took that time to kind of be like a bit of a storyteller, and like traveling and checking out new places, and always checking out new farms, and going and seeing how people in other countries are growing things and always being super interested and telling all my friends about this or that. Probably boring some people with all my tree talk or animal talk, vegetable talk. But yeah, it's showing people that it's just something that can happen. It's something that just a couple people on a hillside can produce a whole ton of food every year. And the pig thing with you're just moving them around and producing just such high quality pork off of your property every year, and having people taste it and be like, wow, I've never had anything like that before.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you raised it? Oh, you slaughtered it and butchered it and smoked it and did the whole thing, and that's the bacon that we're eating right now? I'm like, yep, that's it. So showing people is probably my favorite part of it. Very
cool. Very cool. Well, Kolin, if people want to find out more about your setup, where can they find you online?
We don't have a website yet, but most of the time we just post stuff on Instagram at Starry Ridge Farm or Facebook. That's just Starry Ridge Farm as well. But we're mostly active on those two platforms, and we pretty much post something every day. My girlfriend's way better at it than I am, but we're pretty much always posting pictures of either garden stuff or animal stuff or whatever we got going on around here, carpentry projects we're doing. So definitely look us up there. You can also email us if you need to, starryridgefarm@gmail.com. If you have any questions, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to chat and talk about things and go from there.
Good deal. All right, man. Well, I definitely appreciate you taking the time and talk with me. It was exciting to hear about your setup there, and that sounds like something I'd love to see one of these days. If I ever get to New York again, I'll have to give you a shout.
Yeah. Well, you should. You're always talking about how much you like it up this way, so you might as well stop by at the farm here on your way through again.
Yeah, we were actually sitting around the dinner table tonight, and both boys were like, "Let's go back to New England." So we're talking about that. We got to figure out how to get a farm sitter. Our farm sitter from last year is no longer available, so we gotta cover that now. So, but
that definitely makes it harder for sure. Having all those mouths to feed and for us plants to water.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on. I pray Dottie has a good litter coming up soon, and we have to touch base with you again, see how that works out, and just follow back up with you later.
Yeah, definitely. Anytime, Troy. I really appreciate it, and I definitely appreciate everything you do. I've been getting a lot of inspiration and just a lot of joy out of hearing everybody's stories that you have come on here, and it's really cool to hear, all the different scales that people are at. That's just super interesting to me, is all the angles that people are going at with what they're doing. So yeah. I appreciate it. You do too, Troy.
Good deal, man. Well, I'll let you go. Pray you have a good evening.
Yeah, you too.
All right, take care. Well, all right. Well, I hope you all found that as interesting as I did. I really appreciate Kolin coming on and sharing that experience with us. And I believe there's definitely some stuff to learn there. Again, love the idea of having these opportunities, these polycultures. Now, again, you may say, well, I don't have those opportunities. I don't have those things in place already. Well, it's one of those things. If you put it in place now, work on it now, then years down the road, you'll appreciate the fact that you did it now. It's like the old adage, when's the best time to plant a tree? Well, yesterday was the best time to plant a tree. The next best time to plant a tree is now. So consider that when you're looking at diversifying your farm income, diversifying it's the diversification for protection when it comes to your business, and obviously just to keep you sane. It's kind of neat to have all these other things going on to kind of challenge your brain and give you other opportunities to learn and grow in new experiences. Well, again, appreciate the Patreon support. Just want to do a shout out. Feel free to check out in the show notes details about that. Would again continue to appreciate your all support. Those of you that joined, those of you that have commented and said you really get a lot of value out of the podcast. Consider it like a digital tip jar, if you would. And I appreciate that. And that money does get put right back into some things that we're expanding for Pastured Pigs digitally, as far as a website and some other features. And again, all that's detailed at the Patreon page, so you can see what we're talking about there. So it's not only a tip for me, but it's an investment in some additional resources that we all can share in the future. Well, all right. Well, I'm going to do an all points bulletin now for anyone else that wants to come on. If you know anybody that would like to be interviewed, or you know somebody you'd like me to reach out to, let me know. As we get through the summer here, I've got enough interviews lined up to get us through the summer, but I'd like to have a nice, good roster lined up for the fall, and hopefully when the summer foolishness settles down, be able to explore some other topics as well, as we've discussed. All right, well, I pray everyone have a great week, and thanks again for listening. Y'all take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast, or to submit topics, or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.